Unfortunately, one of my brothers passed away, therefore he is no longer with us. But happily, we were born and raised in Brixton. We were all urchins growing up. We've all grown up to be really decent, sincere, loving, caring, and compassionate people. No, neither of us grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Mike Brewer and his colleague Ed China became famous faces on Wheeler Dealers. They worked together to find cars that were worth keeping and restore them for dedicated drivers. Viewers praised Mike's skill. He knew the car industry inside and out, could find hidden value, and had a talent for making fair agreements. But success brought about changes that shaped his future in unanticipated ways. From his contentious breakup with Ed China to being duped out of a big sum of money, a lot has happened off-screen. So, join us as we talk about what really happened to Mike Brewer. I really want to locate us a nice Mark II Jaguar. The issue is the disparity between the cars that are now available. There are other cars weighing between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds, but they are complete wrecks that require extensive repairs. On the opposite end of the range, cars that have been entirely restored might cost up to 25,000 pounds. Wheeler Dealers debuted in 2003, with Mike Brewer at the head, sourcing and purchasing vehicles that still had a chance on the road. Ed China, the mechanic who restored them and made every repair appear simple, stood right by him. On the show, the duo had a clear mission: to bring each car back to life and prove its value. Their collaboration set the tone for the show, giving fans something to look forward to with each episode. Ed undoubtedly captivated the hearts of viewers with his abilities. He was the mechanic who restored the garage's functionality. In short time, the couple established a reputation that spread throughout the automobile industry. Fans appreciated their chemistry. They enjoyed watching cars that appeared to be beyond repair return to service. It didn't matter if the car was a cheap daily driver or something antique and unusual. Mike and Ed took great care with every build. As the seasons progressed, Wheeler Dealers became a global phenomenon. The production team expanded and locations shifted. The crew relocated its operations to the United States in search of more chances and vehicles to fix. As a result, new issues occurred, budgets expanded, and the workload became more demanding. Essentially, the original framework expanded into something far larger, and while growth brought achievement, it also came strain. Behind the scenes, anxiety began to rise gradually. After 13 seasons together, Ed China dropped the bomb. He was leaving the show. Fans were stunned, and the word spread quickly. According to Ed, he was leaving the show because he disagreed with the changes in production. He believed the mechanical work in the garage was being minimized. As a mechanic, he believed that repairs should be the show's sole focus, and he did not want important processes removed from the screen to save time. Mike, on the other hand, approached the matter from a different perspective. He wanted to keep the show going even as modifications were being made. He believed that adjusting was essential for Wheeler Dealers' survival. Those opposing viewpoints produced a strain that could not be mended. Following Ed's departure, Wheeler Dealers presented Ant Anstead as the new mechanic who will work with Mike. Ant arrived with his own distinct style, bringing new energy and a new workshop layout. In subsequent episodes, Ant handled the repairs while Mike did his thing. Ant's introduction gave the show a fresh rhythm and expanded its reach into new markets. Viewers witnessed speedier builds with current performance advancements with traditional repair. Mike and Ant's relationship created its own storyline in Wheeler Dealers. However, it appears that some viewers were still uncomfortable with Ed's departure from the show. While many devoted fans accepted it as a common occurrence in the profession, others sought to assign blame for Ed's departure. In no time, the focus shifted to Mike, the man who had worked alongside Ed on the show for many years. It didn't matter that both men contributed to the success. It didn't matter how many cars they salvaged from the scrapyard. Mike became the problem for a large portion of the audience. You see, fans had no idea what transpired behind the scenes. They just witnessed the separation. They thought Mike had pushed Ed away. The internet converted those estimates into claims, which fueled outrage. To make matters worse, people began targeting Mike personally. They sent messages including words no one deserves to hear. The attack also spread to his family. His wife was drawn into something she had no involvement in. His daughter also witnessed the backlash. It became evident that this wasn't about the show. It was now a full-fledged attack on Mike and everybody associated with him. While this was going on, the show continued. New builds progressed through the workshop, and new faces appeared on screen. Mike continued to do the work he always did. However, the commotion outside the set did not fade away immediately. Each new season posed the same question. Each announcement drew the same criticism. Whatever occurred with Ed China remained linked to Mike's name. That period compelled him to reconsider how he handled public attention. His enthusiasm for automobiles, on the other hand, remained constant. He continued to buy and sell, being engaged in the marketplace. Despite all of this, some supporters stood by him. They enjoyed the show, with or without Ed. They liked the building and thought the show deserved to continue. They were aware that Mike had helped keep it alive. For them, the alteration was merely a feature of television. People move on. The most important thing is that the show continues to thrive. Mike leaned on those supporters whenever the noise got too loud. Mike faced obstacles he never expected following the separation. It also demonstrated his strength in the face of chaos. Without a question, Mike has seen everything. From Ed's departure to being abused online, nothing struck deeper than the fatigue that came with working non-stop. You see, Wheeler Dealer's setting is high energy. The small garage that formerly housed a few projects has now grown into a full-fledged production facility with tight deadlines. Essentially, the gear has changed, but the efforts remain constant. Mike, on the other hand, began to feel the strain of his efforts. He spent thousands of hours traveling between nations, airports, and motels. He exchanged sleep for the following episode. Days that started with fresh projects and optimistic conversations finished with time zone shifts, red eyes, and the identical process of getting ready for the camera the next morning. What appeared gorgeous on film became a struggle in real life. In an interview, he disclosed that his daughter had reached 22, and he had only been home for a few of her birthdays. She'd grown up seeing her father on film, but rarely in person. While cameras were rolling and deals were being made, he found himself missing family memories that he could not relive. His days no longer seemed like the wild ride that fans had expected. They felt like one long series of deadlines, travel, and repairs. Personal expenses began to outpace victories. Although he held the act together with power and a smile, his smile belied a different reality. Every time he stood in front of the camera, he had to look sharp, speak clearly, and be prepared to close the deal. Backstage, he battled fatigue and absence. He watched other families celebrate while his own continued on without him. The work eventually became a fight for survival rather than a journey. He spent years sleeping in his own bed less than 10 times. The automobiles continued arriving, and the locations changed, but the backstage pressure remained constant. Burnout developed quietly. At first, he dismissed it as part of the work. Then it became evident that the long days were not temporary. They represented the new normal. He realized that it had been years since he had spent time with the individuals that mattered the most. He learned that displaying automobiles at their best did not imply that everything else was fine. He realized that he, too, needed repair, much like the vehicles he had once saved. Mike looked back and realized how far he'd pushed himself. The show helped him achieve a career that many people aspire to. It earned him recognition in the automotive industry and transformed his life forever. However, the hard workload altered his personality. It highlighted what a high price looks like when passion turns into relentless pressure. Burnout is not always obvious. Sometimes it's the knowledge that life has moved on without you. For Mike, that moment came after years of running at full speed. He now understands the value of balance. He understands that no triumph is worth losing, the time you should have spent with your loved ones. If you've been a fan of Mike and Wheeler Dealers, you'll know that he's dedicated his life to assisting consumers in avoiding poor transactions. He has taught viewers how to recognize a fraud, secure their money, and walk away when something does not feel right. However, even he discovered that no one is fully safe in the car trade. He recently admitted to being a victim of a fraud. The situation astounded him, his business partner, and his customers because he had obeyed all the rules and still ended up on the losing end. The vehicle in question was a white Volkswagen Golf MK7 GTD. His company, One Automotive, had listed it for a reasonable price, somewhat more than £10,000 for a car in decent condition. Quickly, there was a surge of interest in the listing. Many individuals reached out to the dealership in order to inquire about the availability of the vehicle. Mike was able to determine that they had priced it appropriately. It did not take a long time for a potential purchaser to contact and express his desire to purchase the automobile immediately. He was so unwilling to go to the dealership that he did not even want to go there himself. As an alternative, he made arrangements for a courier to pick it up. In spite of the fact that Mike ought to have been wary of this, he had previously encountered situations that were very similar. Purchasers frequently resided in remote areas and need the assistance of a car collector. There was no reason to decline the sale as long as the checks were still in good standing. It is precisely what the team did in this situation. After that, they examined the driver's license. It seems as though the details were accurate. After checking the bank information, they proceeded. Both the invoice and the item were identical. It seemed as though everything was normal. As a result, the transaction was concluded. The vehicle was grabbed by the courier from the yard of the dealership and then drive away. At that point, Mike was under the impression that the transaction was complete. However, the true unfolding of events had only begun. The bank got in touch with him not long after that. A dispute had been lodged by the individual whose credit card was used to make the purchase, as they indicated. Furthermore, he asserted that he did not purchase a vehicle from One Automotive. Simply put, he was unaware of the existence of the dealership. The data of his identity and bank account had been taken without his permission and used to commit fraud. Mike, the buyer, believed that the person he was dealing with had never existed after hearing this. In order to steal the Golf and vanish, someone had assumed the identity of another particular individual. Even though it seemed as though the money had been cleared for the sale, it was now being reversed. The bank desired to issue a reimbursement to the person who actually owned the card. Because of this, Mike and his company were forced to endure a severe consequence. The automobile was gone, the money was gone, and the con artist was gone when they all disappeared. Given the circumstances, that is the worst possible outcome for a dealership. Both the asset and the money are forfeited to you. There is no going back, there is no healing, and there is no apology on the way. Another person who became a victim was the person whose personal information was stolen. A number of bills that they were not familiar with were included on their statement. They requested answers, and their bank backed them up in their investigation. During this time, the thief went on to perpetrating the next con. Mike felt a sense of resentment because he had done everything correctly. The inspections were carried out completely. All of the documents were alike. The procedures that the industry recommends dealers to follow were carried out with great attention to detail. All of those measures, however, were not capable of protecting the company from a criminal who was well versed in the art of deceiving them. The lecture was quite impactful. It demonstrated how the automobile industry has evolved throughout time. The back alley dealings are no longer the only place where fraud may hide. In the present day, it is concealed by alluring documentation and easily accessible communication. The circumstances compelled Mike to make his voice heard. Additionally, he cautioned his audience and consumers to remain vigilant. Considering that someone like him, who has decades of experience, is capable of being taken aback, then anyone is capable of doing so. In spite of this, the con was only a small part of the difficulties that Mike had to deal with. Mike Brewer decided to take on a radically different task in 2010, and he did it by leaving the familiar surroundings of dealerships and workshops. He agreed to host Frontline Battle Machines, a series that took him to the heart of Afghanistan when the country was in the midst of a conflict. A weekend hobby car, or a classic machine that was ready for a second chance, was not the vehicle that he was assessing this time around. In one of the most perilous locations on the planet, he was present to witness the vehicles that soldiers had placed their life in order to make a safe journey. From the moment he arrived, Mike was able to witness the reality of the challenges that these machines faced on a daily basis. In his vision, he witnessed armored trucks traversing dusty terrain that was brimming with concealed explosives, helicopters landing in locations where the danger was constantly nearby, and engines that never stopped working since the missions were never finished. Every single defect in these robots may pose a significant threat to the soldiers, as they were dependent on them to bring them back home safely. While the troops were explaining the limitations and difficulties of their equipment, Mike paid great attention to everyone they said. Here, engineering was the difference between life and death. Therefore, he wanted to learn everything there was to know about it. There was a great deal of respect among the soldiers for the fact that Mike had traveled all the way from his home to observe their daily struggle. When it comes to the news, the majority of individuals just read brief pieces. The truth was something that Mike wanted to witness for himself, so he wanted to stand where they stood. He inquired about the performance of each vehicle when subjected to pressure. When asked what would make their employment safer, he inquired about it. Many of them expressed their gratitude to him for finally revealing to the world what they relied on a daily basis, and his attention made them feel as though they were being considered. However, the purpose of the visit goes beyond merely acquiring knowledge. Mike quickly became aware of the perilous circumstances that accompanied his service on the front lines. There was an assault on the location while they were filming. All of a sudden, the safe space that had been established between the presenter and the soldiers vanished. After a while, Mike stopped paying attention to the dangers. It was as if he were living through them. During the course of the assault, the soldiers led him to cover. Even though they were under intense strain, Mike saw their composed responses and movements. Because of that encounter, he never forgot it. In other words, it demonstrated to him that the automobiles he had come to evaluate were more than just tools. Protection was provided by them. What prevented these men from being exposed to a world that was intent on causing them harm? Mike continued to pay attention to what the soldiers had to say when the situation had calmed down. He gained an understanding of the fact that even the smallest design aspects might have a significant impact. Protection that is more robust, a more convenient access to repairs, improved performance on terrain with a rough surface. He placed a high level of importance on each and every proposal because he had recently experienced the significance of the upgrades. Now that we have that out of the way, let's investigate how Mike and Wheeler Dealers became into a phenomenon. Since the beginning of his childhood, Mike has always had a strong affinity for automobiles. The cacophony of engines was a constant presence in the house where he was raised because his father was in the business of customizing automobiles. The choice had already been settled in Mike's mind by the time he reached the age of 12. It was his dream to spend his entire life in the automotive industry. Mike began his career in the automotive industry as soon as he reached the age when he could legally work. In a short amount of time, he was able to acquire knowledge and establish a reputation for being a shrewd businessman who maintained integrity with his clients. He was trusted by others, and that trust contributed to his development. He opened the largest four-wheel drive center in the southern region of England, not long after that. In order to establish himself as a prominent figure in the industry, he began importing one-of-a-kind automobiles from all over the world. On the other hand, he did not stop there. It was one day when he answered a friend's phone without knowing who was on the other end of the line. He continued to expand his business. It turned out that the person who called was a television producer who was looking for someone who spoke about automobiles with genuine expertise. During the transaction, Mike related a couple stories to the audience. His enthusiasm was clear even after a brief conversation with him. It was that call that altered everything. He was presented with the opportunity to play a part in the pilot episode of Deals on Wheels. Mike demonstrated that he had the ability to lead a show by virtue of the fact that Deals on Wheels was a success. Then, further offers came in. After that, he moved on to work for Channel 4's Driven. Following that, a number of other programs on ITV and Discovery, including Auto Trader, Pulling Power, Rex to Riches, and Revved Up, was broadcast. Over time, he became a well-known figure on television. There was a lot of enjoyment in watching him recognize value in places that others overlooked. Due of his extensive knowledge, viewers were led to believe that any pre-owned automobile might be salvaged if the appropriate person considered it. Wheeler Dealers, the show that would come to define his career, was prepared for him by all of those experiences by those experiences. Mike was able to demonstrate all of the ways in which he enjoyed working in the industry through the event. The pursuit of a car that had been forgotten. These are the negotiations, the thrill that comes from reviving something that has been lost for a long time. Because of his abilities and demeanor, it was an ideal match. The year 2025 finds Mike continuing his pursuit of automobiles and his pursuit of stories. Although Wheeler Dealers is still operating, it has taken a more significant step. The Wheeler Dealers World Tour is the most recent edition of the book. This time, Mike and his new partner, Mark Elvis Priestley, are not waiting for automobiles to come to them. Instead, they are going to work together. In order to locate autos, they are traveling to a variety of countries currently. On the other hand, Mike's effort does not come to an end once the filming is finished. Through the business that he owns and operates, Mike Brewer Motors, he continues to be actively involved in the automotive industry. Dealing, negotiating, and assisting drivers in finding the proper vehicle are all things that he continues to do. Additionally, he invented something that had never been seen in the industry before. These are the Used Car Awards. It is the only awards event that takes place annually in the United Kingdom that gives recognition to the most successful used car dealers in the industry. Every year, Mike is the one who takes the stage to honor the hard-working individuals who are responsible for keeping the automotive industry alive. When Mike is not working on his business or filming, he enjoys spending time with his fans at live motoring events, as well as supporting charitable causes and raising money for charitable organizations all around the world.